Kahala Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Hakadosh. Double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of the Great Millstone. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives to do so. To the scattered hopeful elect across the four corners of the earth, and those among the heathen nations that look like the heathen nations, pursuant to Jeremiah 12:9, known as the speckled birds. This is not a black thing. I am the disciple of Pariam, a follower of Great Millstone, coming to you with a lesson in truth and sincerity. This lesson is going to be titled The Devil's Due. Now,
by what I say,
this man that I have before you is Shahid Bolson, and he kind of comes in that same spirit as Malcolm X, very well educated, seems to be a very good, I guess like a political, he looks at, politics in the sense of almost in a biblical standpoint, but coming from the Muslim view. Now he doesn't really give any scriptures or anything like that, but that's what I'm here to do, is to break it down for what we know and what we've been taught by the elders and bishops of Great Millstone. So without further ado, this is Mr. Shahid Bolson.
They accuse me of hating the West. They accuse me of being divisive or what have you. But look, if the truth is hateful to you, or if you think that someone telling you the truth hates you because they're telling you the truth, why do you think that the one who's been lying to you loves you? The fact of the matter is that the West...
So, this is 2 Ezra 6:28. As for faith, it shall flourish, corruption shall be overcome, and the truth, which hath been so long without fruit, shall be declared.
The collective West, Western Europe and America, have an absolutely grotesque history. And it doesn't matter what level of society you're even talking about, or what aspect of the so-called civilization that you're talking about. I mean, don't get mad at me for what I'm saying. Get mad about having been lied to about it. That's what you should get mad about. I mean, do you know when the Europeans came to the Muslim world during the Crusades?
This is the 2 Thessalonians 2. I'm going to read from verse 7 to 12. It says, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work, and iniquity is sin upon sin upon sin. Only he who letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan shall all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause power shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe in a lie. It says verse 12, that they all might be damned, who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And that's exactly who this wicked is. It's just Esau, Edom. And working with Amalek, who's the great grandson of Esau, Edom, the head tribe, the so-called small hats. But let's let him continue.
SubhanAllah, they had literally in their lives never met people before who actually were even hygienic, who even washed every day, who bathed regularly, who washed their hands before they ate, who brushed their teeth, who had basic sanitation.
He's going into, the hygiene of the Moors, who were Israelites in Andalusia and that part of Spain. This is, the wild men who came across the Moors. You see all the tapestries and that they're actually depicting that, which is actual historical events. And those tapestries cannot be changed, by the way, because those Moors, as they're showing us, different brown-skinned people.
systems in their societies, in their cities. That was the first time they encountered civilized people. And you know what those Christian crusaders did? Those holy warriors of Christendom? They straight up ate people, boiled human beings. Muslims in pots. They roasted children on spits. That's what they did. And we know that there are numerous incidents of African slaves being cannibalized on the ships, on the boats, and once they got there. And everyone knows by now how Europe practiced what they called medical cannibalism, where they would consume mummified flesh and drink blood because they thought it was good for their health. This is where you come from. They would publicly execute criminals, and then pass blood around the crowd from that criminal for people to drink. And you don't want to hear about how filthy and how degenerate their monarchs were, their aristocracy were, all across Europe. The rich and powerful, how they were infested with lice and parasites, how they defecated where they stood, how diseased and how cruel and how perverted and how syphilitic they were. Henry VIII, Ferdinand VII of Spain, Leopold of Belgium. I mean, it's a through line. It's a through line from Caligula right up to Biden, right up to Trump, right up to Macron until now. Under the powdered wigs and the fancy clothes, there was rot, opulence, and putrescence side by side throughout all of European history. And no, it's not just the aristocracy. No, it's not just the rich. Don't kid yourself. Like I said, we're talking about every level and every aspect of that society. Your doctors were going from performing autopsies to delivering babies without cleaning their instruments, without washing their hands. I mean, when it was even suggested to them that doctors maybe should and surgeons should wash their hands and should practice basic hygiene.
So he's just kind of really going into, just the filth of Esau, Edom, okay, and everything they got in this modern world is all due to the Israelites. This is the book of Hebrews 12 and 16, and it reads, "Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright." So it's just showing you, the immorality and the godlessness of Esau. Okay, and it's obviously showing how he sold his birthright. He didn't just give it away. But it was it was destined for him to do that.
In as late as the 1840s, the people who suggested that were mocked. Well, you didn't start washing your hands until the 20th century. You understand me? Meanwhile, Muslim physicians had been sanitizing for 1,000 years already. In Europe, they would hurl excrement from their windows into the street, literally dumping filth on the people's heads. You had to legislate that to make them stop. You didn't have the basic moral sense and the decency to just not do that. You literally had to be forced by law to stop doing it. The River Thames in London was a moving cesspit. You didn't even build sewers until the 1850s. Meanwhile, Muslims had underground water disposal pipelines for centuries. I'm not saying that you weren't smart enough to do it. I'm saying it wasn't a priority for you. You didn't even think it was important to not have filth in your city. That in Paris, in the city of Paris, the morgue used to display bodies behind glass as a sort of a civic attraction. These people are macabre and brutal. This is a macabre and brutal people. I'm telling you, you have to understand the history here. You have to understand the history because it hasn't stopped.
And this is something just came into my lab right here. So this is Habakkuk 2 and 4. It says, "Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith." Right. So it's just showing you, they're not a so-called holy people, set apart. And it clearly shows.
Look at the forced starvation in Gaza, sponsored by the United States of America. This isn't the first time. From the engineered famine against the Irish by the British, the potato famine so-called, to the Germans in East Africa, they starved those people too. They burned their crops, they seized their food. Entire regions were forced into starvation as policy. Same in India in 1943 in Bengal. In Kenya in the 1950s, you had detention camps, you had forced labor, you had torture, you had castration, you had sexual assault, all systematic. France fired nuclear devices in the Algerian desert, and they buried contaminated waste under the sand. As savage as you were to people overseas, you were just as bad to your own. Like I said, in Ireland, you had those mother and baby homes, the Magdalene laundries by the Catholic Church that were nothing but sadistic torture chambers. That operated deep into the 20th century. The State Commission in Ireland counted thousands of child deaths at those facilities. Those laundries were nothing but forced labor camps. Then, of course, you had the eugenics boards that sterilized tens of thousands of people under legal cover in Scandinavia for decades, in the United States, all across the West. This was.
Yep. And speaking of that eugenics, they did it back with Ephraim too, with my people, my tribe. You know, you go in. Supposedly, you wanted to have American Dream, and they lied to you about this stuff, and then essentially, the women would go in and have children, and unbeknownst to them, they had a surgery that was done, and you can actually watch that on YouTube. It's a documentary called The Operation, or in Spanish, La Operación. And yeah, man, they did that, and I even talked to my mom about that, and she verified that. She had several friends that had got this sterilization that was done to Ephraim, and they couldn't have kids anymore. So he's telling the truth. Well, this is Daniel's 8 and 20, the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 25. And through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall he destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Through his policies, that's how he gains, is through lying and deceit, and I can't really say all the other words. I don't want to flag the video, but starts with a rob and murder and all the other stuff.
What's going on? You had human zoos, lynchings, rape, torture, murder, mutilation, and cannibalism. See, when I talk about this, you're going to feel like I'm talking about some other society. It's going to feel like I'm talking about some other people, some other primitive, backward, savage people. That's how it will sound to you, that I can't possibly be talking about your own people, because these are all things that you accuse everyone else of being. But in fact, there is no one with a more disgraceful and more degenerate history than the one that you won't teach, because it's your own. You won't teach your own history, and that's a shame. It's a shame because people have a right to know. People need to know what they're dealing with. I mean, your own people need to know that. Your own people need to know what they're dealing with, because the society that they live in is not the society that they were told they live in. I keep telling you, Epstein was not one bad apple. Diddy wasn't. Trump isn't. The truth is that whole barrel is spoiled. The whole barrel is rotten. So what chance does a good apple have in that rotten barrel? Even if you are still insisting to call the continuous record of uninterrupted wrongdoing, uninterrupted sickness, evil, and cruelty, even if you insist on calling that an alarming number of isolated incidents that just keep happening again and again and again at the systemic level, at the institutional level, at the collective level, at the societal level, at the community level, and at the individual level.
So essentially, I wanted to go into Genesis 4, and this is speaking of Cain and Abel, because Esau and Amalek come in that same spirit of Cain, who slew his brother. Okay, it says, and the Lord Yahweh said unto Cain, this is Genesis 4:9, and the Lord Yahweh said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? He was basically saying, I don't know. Cain responded, am I his guardian? It's a real messed up mentality, and it really is a YN mentality, but anyway. And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. Yeah, when you work in the crops, you have to really, really toil. Back in ancient times, and it was, the earth was much more rich. But so essentially, from now on, essentially, Cain is a homeless wanderer on the earth. That word vagabond um, goes into without a fixed abode. He's been sent everywhere. Through the Caucasus Mountains and the region east, and worked his way out west. He's never he's always fidgety. Can't be still, and he can never have enough. Let's go to verse 13. And Cain said unto the Lord Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. The boo-hoo, even though you did wrong. You're the first to slew anyone in the world, right? And besides, I believe the word Cain also goes to the word weapon. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and get that real quick. You go to the interlinear, Strong's 87014, and it's Kwayan, and it goes into, let's see, possession. All right, he was the first murderer, right there, having did that to his brother Abel. All right, so let's go back. Verse 14, behold, thou hast driven me out of this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. Verse 15, the Lord said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold, right? And you could kind of see that with this whole Charlie Kirk incident, right? Turning this guy into a martyr, when really, it probably was a deep state. But anyway, you say anything or speak out against him, look what's happening. You got people left and right getting fired and quieted, by the deep state, And the Lord Yahweh set a mark upon Cain, lest any find him and should, that word right there, to him. But let's go ahead and continue with Shahid Bolson.
Over and over and over again, without pause, without fail. I'm asking, where is there any evidence of good apples in that rotten barrel? This is a lot that you have to wrap your heads around. I understand that. And it's really just the first level of understanding. It's really just the first level of recognition. The first level is recognizing that, yes, we are not talking about isolated incidents. We are not talking about a few bad apples. We are talking about a so-called civilization that has always been primitive, that has always been brutal, that has always been twisted, and that never changed, that never evolved. And that's why they don't teach you about their history honestly. That's why they have to propagandize you and miseducate you. And why they have to pretend to be shocked. They have to pretend to be shocked by the Diddy's and the Epsteins and so forth. Why they pretend to be appalled, precisely to cover up how actually standard this behavior is and always has been in that society. Everything that Diddy was doing is being done right now. Everything that Epstein was doing is being done right now. Good Lord, even what Hitler was doing is being done right now. Even what Leopold did is going on right now. Like I said, it's just a code they use, a hypnotic suggestion. When they tell you that there were a few bad apples, when they tell you there's a few bad apples, then you will assume that the rest of the barrel is good, but it's not good. It's diseased. That's just the first level of realization. That's the first level of recognition that you have to come around to. A lot of Westerners will get so triggered and so defensive about this that they won't even be able to accept this layer of reality, much less the next layer of reality.
Let's go to Jeremiah. Chapter 49, verse 10. This is what he's speaking of right now. It says, but I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren, and he is neighbor, and he is not. So essentially, it says his children, his brothers, and his neighbors will be destroyed, and Edom itself will be no more. And that's soon to come within prophecy. But yeah, and then right now Edom is they're being made bare. They're their skirts are being lifted, in a sense, and really these curses are slowly coming upon them right now. All right, and that's spoken of in the book of Deuteronomy, I believe the 30th chapter, but we'll get that later in a little bit.
Because the next layer is even harder to reconcile yourself with if you're a Westerner. The next layer is realizing that there is no escaping the consequences of your history. And realizing that those consequences are, in fact, being imposed upon you right now, especially in America, but in Europe too. I mean, look at Europe. It's falling apart. Europe is falling apart. They're going extinct, and even their own natural extinction isn't fast enough for them. They're rushing.
This is Luke 12:2. It says, "The time is coming when everything that is covered up will be revealed, and all that is secret will be made known to all." It says, "Whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in the light, and what you have whispered behind closed doors will be shouted from the housetops for all to hear." All right, that's in the NLT, Slovakia. But yeah, just going back to these curses, befalling upon them. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 7. It says, "And the Lord thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee." And that's also spoken of in the book of Luke, the first chapter with Zechariah's prophecy. You ask a Christian, what are they saved from? They can't tell you, because you're not saved from anything. It's the scripture speaks of that you should be narrowly be saved, and those are the ones who do the will of Yahweh Bashim El Shai and faith and works. When meanwhile, these wacky techie Christians just believe in it by just faith. Make that make sense. But meanwhile, the laws are done away with except for tithing. I digress.
Towards war and conflict on the continent. Macron just told hospitals in France that they need to be ready for a European war by next year. War with Russia. They're tearing their own societies apart. They're impoverishing themselves. They're enslaving themselves. They're deindustrializing themselves. They're being asset stripped. Exactly what they did to the people that they colonized. Europe is stumbling into the abyss of their own making. America, the imperial heir of Europe, the neoliberal economic firing squad of corporate power. They used to spray their bullets like a mass shooter all across the global south, all across the Muslim world, all across Africa, all across so-called Latin America. Well, America is descending into madness. You're descending into madness because you're cursed. That's why I've said you cannot properly analyze geopolitics. You cannot properly analyze geopolitics if you exclude the reality of divine justice. You cannot exclude God from your assessments. You can't exclude Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from your forecasts. And you cannot be as unjust, as brutal, as degenerate, as wicked.
He's going into how all these things were being tested all over the place. And they have to answer up for that, So let's go to the book of Numbers, chapter 35 and 33. And it reads, "So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it." All right. So, and then he's also going into, it wasn't me that did those things, and those, my ancestors. I don't have anything to do with that. Okay, but the scripture says otherwise. When you go to Exodus 34, in verse 7, and it says, "Keeping the mercy of thousands, forgiving iniquity, which is sin upon sin, and transgression, and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity, which is the sin upon sin, of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, unto the third and fourth generation." So you have to answer up for what was done, okay, in such a heinous way. You have Mm. Uh, and this also proves reincarnation, regeneration. You know, Esau has not built civilizations. It just managed to conquer them and um, utilize its people to forward their agenda.
As America has been, and actually think that the consequences are not going to be severe. You understand? The suffering of whole continents at your hands is going to ricochet back onto America. I said you're cursed. You know it and I know it. That's the truth. We both know this. Because you can't have any sort of religious sense, any religious sense of justice, and not know that. Even if you call yourself a Christian, if you call yourself a Christian, if you call yourself believing in God in any way whatsoever, you cannot pretend that you don't know that America is cursed and it has been cursed ever since.
This is another precept. This is Exodus 20, verses 5 and 6. It says, Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord Yahweh, thy power, am a jealous power, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation to them that hate me, and showing mercy unto them, unto thousands of them that love me, and keeping my commandments. And who was given the commandments? Okay, who was the sprinkling of the blood by Moses? Right, those are the Israelites. That wasn't everybody. You guys have just done supersessionism and just took everything that's been written that's really speaking of the Israelites and said that's for everybody. And you got to pay for that.
You all landed over there in the first place and started massacring the indigenous people and stealing their land. What your Zionist brigades are doing to the Palestinians right now is just a fraction of what you did to the Native Americans. What Hitler did was a fraction of what you did, in fact. And you really think that you were going to be able to escape the consequences of that? Of course not. Obviously not. Why do you even think for a minute that you could escape the consequences of decimating millions upon millions of people? To think that you would get away with that, wallahi, to even think that you could get away with that, to even think that you would never be held accountable for that is blasphemy. It's blasphemous for you to think that you could get away scot-free. Especially when you have never even done anything ever since then, except to compound the wrongdoing and to add to your record of crimes. You understand me? You have done nothing to atone. You haven't done anything to atone for what you have done. You and I both know that. Genocide, chattel slavery, rape, torture, lynching, murder, dehumanization, discrimination, segregation, exploitation, subjugation, war all around the world. Why, what sort of a God do you worship that would turn a blind eye to all of that? What kind of a God did you have in mind when you say God bless America? Because I know you're not talking about the God. I know you're not talking about the creator of the universe. Bless America for what? Bless America for what? If you did what you did and then say God bless America, that's just another blasphemy. Well, you're taking the Lord's name in vain when you say God bless America. That's the truth. You can't invoke God to bless what he has prohibited. You can't invoke God to bless what he punishes, to bless what causes his wrath. You have been worshiping someone else. Someone.
The Babylonian Talmud, that's the Amalekites book right there, and that's why people don't understand why is it that America follows the nation of the small hats so blindly, because this is the relationship they have. The small hats, there's numerous videos out there, all right, that speaks of their rabbis, speaking of how the YT Americans, Christianity or Christendom, Salakia, is Esau as Edom, all right? They'll say Isaf, all right, and which is the modern Roman Empire. They that's out of their words. But you want to get mad at us because supposedly we're speaking hate, and you don't even do your own due diligence, your own research. Bunch of lazy ass.
Else entirely, something else entirely. You have taken a whole other being as your God. If you actually think that your actions merit any sort of blessing, no one would bless what you have done as a nation except Iblis. No one would approve of what you have done except for the devil himself. That's why I told you that, and why you need to know. You need to understand this about your society.
That devil is not no devil with pitchfork. That's the deceiver. That's what that's speaking of. He says, you are your father, the devil, all right?
It has been worshiping the jinn. They've been worshiping the shayateen ever since prehistory, like I said. And that formed the whole character, the whole ethos of their so-called civilization. You can't properly understand the West if you don't understand that. Honestly, you can't be dismissive about that. Like I said last time, this is in fact exactly why they are almost the only people in the whole world who pretend that the devil doesn't exist. They're almost the only people. They're the only people. The people in the Muslim world, the people in Africa, the people in Latin America, the people in Asia. Everyone knows this is real. Even in places like Russia and China, after decades of state-imposed atheism, most people there even also still accept this reality. Different people in different places call the jinn different things, sure. Demons, ghosts, fairies, spirits, whatever the case may be. But we know the reality. We know the reality of the unseen. But your so-called civilization insists on denying it. Exactly the same way that they deny everything else that's true about reality, that's true about themselves. While their denial is conspicuous in this way, it's a protective, defensive denial. Because no one else is more closely aligned, in fact, and more subservient to the shayateen as much as your society. So that denial is part of what is expected of you. That's part of the cover-up that is expected of you. And that's just par for the course with you, because anyway, you cover up everything already as it is. Now listen, again, I'm not attacking you. Understand me. Please understand me. If your house is on fire, and I come to tell you that your house is burning, and you need to get out, are you going to get defensive because you think I'm insulting your house? Use your mind. There's a
So you're saying your house is on fire, right? This is the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 25. It says, and Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. It said, and if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall this kingdom stand? All right. Let's go to Isaiah 19 and 2. And it reads, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. So essentially, this is a powder keg, that's getting ready to implode at any moment, and they're utilizing Jake, or the face of Jake, to be that ignition to the powder keg. Okay, you get that lily white dove that was slewed by the Jake on the train over in North Carolina, and then the whole Charlie Kirk incident, and then you also got another lynching that happened in Mississippi, but nobody's talking about that, but they want to make old Charlie boy a martyr.
There's a gas leak in your building, and your building manager is trying to tell you that everything is fine, and I'm trying to tell you that it's going to kill you. You tell me which one of us, me or that manager, cares more about you and more about your welfare and your well-being. Don't get mad at me. Well, I think that the gas has already gotten to your brain. If you can't think straight enough to know that I'm trying to tell you something for your own good, look, I'm telling you, there is no way to escape the consequences. Okay, I didn't do this to you. Your ancestors did this to you. Your own ancestors did this to you. Your ancestors and your leaders today. Your media today. Your schools today. Like I said, recognizing and acknowledging the reality of what your ancestors really did and what they really were, and yes, who they really worshipped, understanding that is just the first layer. And as soon as someone accepts this reality, that layer, they just accept that. Then they'll jump immediately to, well, how do we make a change? I'm not like my ancestors. Isn't that good enough? How do we make a change so that we can avoid these negative consequences? Because they haven't accepted that second layer, that most important second layer, which is that the consequences cannot be avoided, cannot be evaded, cannot be resisted, and cannot be defied.
You hear what he said. He said the consequences cannot be avoided. Okay? So this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 30, and verse 6 through 8. I'm going to read this in the NLT. Just follow along. KJV's on the left-hand side. It says, now let me ask you a question. Do men give birth to babies? Then why do they stand there ashamed-faced, hands pressed against their sides like a woman in labor? Because they're in such pain, seeing what's about to happen. They're in disbelief, agony. It says, in all history, there has never been such a time of terror. It will be a time of trouble for my people, Yasharallah, people of Israel. Yet in the end, they will be saved. For in that day, says the Lord, Yahweh of heaven's armies, or Lord of hosts on the KJV, I will break the yoke from their necks and snap their chains. Foreigners will no longer be their masters. Okay? So this is speaking of, times of Jacob's troubles. Okay? And it says right here, it says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's troubles. It says, but he shall be saved out of it. And not all of Jacob's going to be saved. You're going to have 2/3 who have to know death by pain. That will perish. Only a third will be saved out of it, and then you have the elect. And not everyone's going to be destroyed. Obviously, you're going to have the other nations. They're going to, serve their purpose in the kingdom to establish it on earth as it is in heaven, like it says in the Lord's Prayer.
Punishment is already underway in America. And like I said, at least one element of that punishment is madness. The society is being driven into madness, just like the syphilitic monarchs of your history. I don't even mean this metaphorically. No, I'm talking quite literally. The society is going insane. I mean, look at any old film clip.
So this is the book of Matthew, when he said that society is going insane, it's driven into madness. This is Matthew 24, verses 9. It says, "They shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill." Right there it says, "Kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." Now I want to get that word. Wax is Strong's G 5594, and it goes into that word psycho. All right, this is where it comes from. So essentially, this is driven into madness. When people are breathing and blowing, it says to cool by blowing. When you see somebody, just breathing profusely and heavy, and then you're just looking around, and they start losing it. That's having a psychotic episode. Okay. It's forcible respiration. It says it right there.
I don't mean old Hollywood movies. I don't mean that. I mean, like, look at old interviews, old footage of people talking, like, in, say, the early 1900s, for example. Listen to them. Listen to how they talk. Listen to the clarity, and listen to the sobriety of their voices and their facial expressions. Now open TikTok. Open Instagram. Or if you took someone from 2025 and you send them back to 1925, no matter what they were talking about, everyone would think that they are drunk. Everyone would think that these were mad people, unhinged, unstable, volatile, wild people. Even 50 years ago, they would have that impression. Do you know that according to the previous mental health standards, at least half of the American public today, at least half would be diagnosed as having a mental illness or psychological disorder. I mean, even according to the modern standards, it's not far from that. Roughly a quarter of all Americans have been diagnosed with some sort of a psychological or mental disorder, and about half of all young people. And I'm telling you, this is the toll of your history. That's what this is. This is the devil taking his due. Don't you know your own folklore? Don't you know about the devil taking payment in the form of your progeny? Those stories don't come out of nowhere. It's the story of your so-called civilization. Your ancestors sold you out for the sake of pomp and splendor in their day. They sold you out so they could sip their mint julep tea on the veranda of some great plantation house in the American South, while human beings were being whipped and being raped and being treated like animals. They sold you out so that they could have steal their land and have their homesteads and their farms and their ranches soaked in the blood of Native Americans. They sold you out so that they could have the minerals and the oil and the gas and the gold and the diamonds from all around the world, from all around the global South, when colonized people were the ones digging those resources out of the earth for them, and then they themselves got buried in those same holes. That was the bargain. That was the deal that your ancestors made. Everyone thinks, or everyone says, that America was built on stolen land by stolen labor. Yes, but I'm telling you that there's no such thing as stolen land. There's no such thing as stolen labor. There's only borrowed land. There's borrowed labor, and eventually you're going to have to pay for it. And your payment is coming due. There's no fix. Because when you think about trying to fix things, what you really mean is trying to figure out how to...
So he said there's no fix. He said you didn't purchase it, you borrowed it. Because there were people already here. Okay? And it was borrowed by force, obviously. Thinking that they didn't have to pay. But that bill is coming due. Okay? And the payment is going to be taken. Let's go to the book of Psalms 49:11-13. It says, "The inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. Nevertheless, man being in honor abideth not. He is like the beasts that perish." All right, but it says, "But their fame will not last. They will here it says, die just like animals." Verse 13 in NLT. "This is the fate of fools, though they are remembered as being wise." All right. So yeah.
Put off the inevitable consequences, and that's not going to happen. You can forget about that. You can't vote your way out. You can't policy your way out. You can't march or protest your way out. You can't virtue signal your way out. You can't even reparations your way out. The bill is due, and payment will be taken, one way or another. And as I say, payment is already being taken right now. I'm telling you, the fate of America is sealed. And it was sealed over 400 years ago. You're just now reaching the end of that contract. You know, I said some time ago that Trump was actually hated in America and Europe during his first administration, everyone knows. But he was actually popular in the global south. Around the rest of the world, people liked Trump. Arabs liked him, Asians, Africans, South Americans generally. Generally speaking, he was actually popular with the countries in the global south. Even China likes him, despite the performative rivalry. And I'll tell you why. Because we all recognize that he is the embodiment of the devil's due. Trump being appointed over the United States signaled to the rest of us the end of American empire. I don't blame him for that. Like I said, it isn't happening because...
This is John 8, verses 44. It says, ye of your father, the devil, all right, the deceiver. It says, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, going back to, Cain, Abel, and abode not in the truth. Because the spirit's not lifted up right in him, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own. For he is a liar and the father of it. Verse 45, and because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. But you're going to realize in those days that the men of Great Millstone, those who do the work of the Father, we've been speaking the truth, all right? And you're going to realize that, in that day, that a prophet has been among you. Lord willing, speaking of those brothers that go out and are diligent, and and Lord willing of myself, Aparatazah.
Of Trump. Trump just proves that it's happening. Trump is just a big orange final notice for payment due. That's what he is. And he's overseeing the dismantling of the American-centric world order. The walls are closing around America. And the demons are descending down into those, between those walls to loot and to pillage anything and everything, and anyone and everyone in that land. And I'm not saying this spitefully, and I'm not saying it hatefully, and I'm not trying to rub it in, and I'm not trying to gloat. You understand? I'm not trying to insult you, but you need to understand this was always going to happen. And they have not prepared you for it. They have lied to you about what's going on. They've lied to you about your country. They lied to you about your history. They lied to you about who they are. They lied to you about what they are. They lied to you about how they have been, so that you couldn't see what was coming. You couldn't see this coming. In fact, most of you still can't see it coming, even though it's upon you already. And that's unfair. To me, I find that unfair. It's unfair to you. It's unjust to you. It's treacherous. Like I said, it's like you're in a building that has a gas leak, and the manager of that building keeps telling you that everything is fine. Well, it's not fine. It's diabolical. That's a diabolical thing to do. It's a diabolical way to treat your own people. So I know there'll be people who say, okay, what can we do about it? And that's what I'm trying to tell you. There is nothing you can do about it. There is nothing you can do about it. You have to understand that what is happening is irreversible, and you need to make a way for yourself. Your inheritance is a running tab across the centuries, and the collectors are not sentimental at all. They will take payment in the most precious of currencies. They'll take payment in the form of your sanity, of your family, of your future, of your children. Your society is sliding into delirium, and you can see it in their eyes. You can see it. You can hear it.
No, you cannot build here, okay? We do the best that we can. We don't just lay down and just let everything happen. But you cannot build here, okay? So you have to seal yourself from nonsense. All right, this is Matthew 6, verses 19. It says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust does corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. It says, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. Verse 21, for where your treasures is, there will your heart be also.
In their voices, you can recognize it in their ranting and in their deceit. Their perpetual condition of chronic dishonesty. You can see they're losing their minds. So what do? You need to refuse the rituals that confirm you as a part of that bargain, because that's what they are. They're rituals. You're tithing to the idols of empire, and you're subscribing to the creed of empire. Profit without conscience, public discourse without truth, pleasure without responsibility, loyalty without justice. At Middle Nation, we talk about epistemological sovereignty. And of course, we're talking about the Muslims. We mean Muslims. But even if you are a non-Muslim, you need to extricate yourself from the language and the lexicon, ideologically, the intellectual lexicon of Western so-called civilization, from the paradigms, from the propaganda, from the ideologies, from the bigotries, from the falsehood, from the triviality, and from the trivialization of what actually matters, the trivialization of the important, and the polarization over insignificant things. Performative morality as a smokescreen for actually operative immorality. You need to learn to speak in words that actually carry weight. Don't just repeat slogans, slogans and talking points.
This is Romans 12:2. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of power. Okay? That's what he's saying. You got to break this down into scriptures to get understanding, to live life by knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. All right. And the reason why is because we were created to be holy. Deuteronomy 7:6. Let's go ahead and get it real quick. That's lucky. I know this is a long lesson, but I want to break this down to several different parts. But it says, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord Yahweh thy power, and the Lord Yahweh thy power have chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Okay. It's not that, we're essentially, trying to say we're better or anything, but, we were chosen. Okay. And sorry, you have to live with that. And that root word is kodash, to be set apart, to dedicate, clean, ceremonially, or morally.
The hypnosis of the entertainment that they're playing for you to drown out the alarm bells that are supposed to inform you that your house is filling up with gas. Partition your household, partition yourself with a disciplined approach to information and discourse. Seal yourself off from nonsense as much as you can. Wallahi. Don't just shrug when people spew nonsense. It's not innocuous. You shrug, you expose your jugular, and that's the whole point. You understand me? Don't let your guard down when people start talking nonsense. That's when you need to put your guard up, because they're talking nonsense for a reason. And you need to try to reduce your dependency on the systems that are collapsing right now. Debt is a leash. You need to cut it, even if that means self-imposed harsh austerity in your lifestyle. You need to get yourself out of debt. Consumption is also a leash. The less you consume, the more you're going to be able to breathe. Remember, this isn't about trying to change what's happening. This isn't about trying to change what's happening. It's about trying to survive what's happening, because it's going to happen either way. It's about trying to survive and hopefully getting through it in a way that will allow you to thrive. So you need to accept the fact that the empire is going to keep, rearranging the furniture to distract you from the fact that the whole structure is falling apart. They're going to continue to feed you slogans and contradictory policies and pronouncements and news and misinformation and promises. You need to ignore all of that. They're going to try to auction both nostalgia and cartoonish hope. They're going to package decline as renewal. They try to sell you therapy for the wounds that they themselves keep inflicting on you. And you need to try to disconnect you need to disconnect from those headphones. Don't be distracted and don't be preoccupied with Trump. He's just the stamp on the envelope that carries the final notice. You don't have to.
This is 1 Peter 5:8. So be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, right, or deceiver, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. All right. So we're preparing ourselves, and switching towards, studying, always being ready to give an answer, unto this truth, unto this word. All right.
Like him or hate him, in order to read what that notice says. The message is quite simple. The American-centric world order is closing its books. It's closing out its accounts. And most of the world has already adjusted to this reality. Most people in the world are already prepared for the life after that. They have new partnerships. They have new circuits of capital. They have new corridors of trade. Your leaders hid this update from you by MAGA spamming you. So now you have to prepare yourself without them. Like I say, no one is on your side. So prepare. Don't panic. Prepare. Try to learn a craft, for example, that produces value independent of the centralized system. Grow something edible. Fix something broken. Keep modest reserves for yourself in food, water, essential goods, and so forth, essential tools, and share them on a reciprocal community-building basis. Try to remove all theatrics and performance from your life, from your behavior, from your personality. Try to rotate yourself away from device screens and towards studies, away from algorithms towards actual people, away from outrage towards service. These are very old instructions, and they work before empires rose and they work after empires fall. If you're convinced.
So this is Matthew chapter 24, verse 13. It says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And then we go to verse 20, right? Because he's saying, prepare. He says, but pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Because we know we may not even be in our own homes, during that time, because it's going to be, the Egyptians against the Egyptians, just like, people fighting up against each other. So, we pray that we have a hedge of protection, and that, the Lord is watching over us, even if we have to leave our abode, our humbled abodes, our bayas.
Convenience rests on someone else's pain that you need to become comfortable with inconvenience. You need to guard your mind. Your culture markets derangement as liberation. You need to protect your children's innocence the same way that you would protect their lungs in a house full of poison gas. Don't outsource the formation of your children's character and their personalities and their minds. Don't outsource that to their iPads and their devices. Because remember, the devil will take your children as payment for your ancestors' debt if you allow your children to be currency. So protect your family. Gather your own people. Gather your people. Choose a small circle and formalize mutual obligations. Write them down. Share meals, share costs, share childcare, share transport, share learning. when supply lines snap, and they will, those bonds will hold.
So, especially, brothers who have families, he's saying these supply lines are going to snap, and then, we might have to help out other brothers. Your family better snap into a motherfucking Slim Jim, okay? And be ready and willing to help, okay? Especially if, for amongst the body of believers. So this is Book of Sirach 25:7. It says, "There be 9 things which I have judged in mine heart to be happy, and the 10th I will utter with my tongue. A man that hath joy of his children, and he that liveth to see the fall of his enemy." Just as Zacharias was saying in Luke 1:71. I get this a lot, but it still echoes. Very true. And it reads, I'll read verse 69. "And he raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David," speaking of Yahushai. "And he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began." Because that's how the Lord speaks, through the prophets. Verse 71, "that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us." All right, that's true salvation. That's the gospel. Okay.
Also keep you human in a time that drains people of their humanity. And if you're Muslim, and really even if you're not Muslim, because this truly is essential.
Chew the bones, chew the meat, spit out the bones. He is Muslim, but it's otherwise it's still a good message. The Lord could use whom He pleases to bring out His message.
Turn your face to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pray for the courage to pay what you owe in repentance. Pay what you owe in repentance before.
Obviously, we're going to pray to the east and pray to Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai, to our power. Okay?
Taken in punishment. And pray for the rulers, even the ones that you resent. Pray that they will be saved from doing harm and from being harmed. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use them as instruments of justice, even despite themselves. Pray for the oppressed, at home and abroad. Pray that they will be given relief, that they'll be given dignity, and that they'll be given victory without corruption. Don't confuse patience with passivity. Endurance is a weapon. Endurance is a weapon. And it gives you time to decide what the next right move is, what the next right decision is going to be. And
knowing that patience is suffering. Okay? And that's what it gives us, endurance.
And one decision after another, that becomes your life. The devil's due is real. That bill is older than any voter roll. It's thicker than any law book. Your ancestors opened the account with conquest and with cruelty, and every generation has added line items: wars, theft, deception, degradation, and so forth. And the compounding interest on that debt became your culture. You are both unfortunate enough and blessed enough to be alive at the moment of reckoning. It's very heavy, but it's also an honor. You can choose to be better ancestors to your descendants than yours were to you. Consider that right now, you are writing the history that will be in the curriculum of your great-grandchildren and your descendants.
In the kingdom of heaven, there's not going to be, you'll have that history, but we're not here to build up for, forever. We don't know how much longer we have. We're here to just do the work of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. All right, but this is Job 20:4-5. It says, "Knowest thou not this of old, since man was placed upon earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite but for a moment?"
Inshallah, bi'idhnillah, can actually be grateful then for what you.
Anyways, I pray this lesson was edifying. Kwam Yashrallah, Shalom, Shalom. On to the next.